Most professionals think a translator solves the language problem. But in reality, it hides a much bigger one. Because every time someone speaks Spanish through a translator, trust drops, emotion gets filtered, and opportunities disappear without you even noticing. Studies show that interpreted conversations take 35% longer, reduced emotional accuracy, and dramatically lower relationship quality. In this video, I'm going to break down the real cost of relying on translators, what professionals are missing even though they don't even realize that they're missing. Then I'll show you the fastest way professionals are becoming fluent in the modern age. Okay, now let's say you don't translate. Let's say you use an interpreter, right? For conversations, for deals, for meetings, for whatever. You're a professional, right? For some sort of encounters, you use an interpreter for important meetings, right? Now, the average interpreter, based off of studies, charges about like 50 to 150 bucks an hour for in-person, or $1 to $5 per minute for phone calls, according to the American Translators Association. But a medical practice that uses phone interpreted. Now, if you think of an average medical association, it usually uses interpreters for like 35 to 40% of its time, especially if it's in a heavily Hispanic area, if it's in a heavily packed Hispanic area. And of course it's money, but also if you think about it, a physician that lives in Miami or Houston, a heavily populated, dense Spanish area, Hispanic area, that uses a translator for 35% of their time, makes the conversation 35% slower. And if you think of 30 visits in a day, that's hours. That's countless hours wasted. But the scary part isn't even the money or the waste. It's something totally different. It's the time delay. You're wasting time. It's like that momentum when you're in the work, when you're talking with somebody, that translator, that interpreter just kind of blocks that emotional momentum of conversation that you have with a real person. The interaction they have starts feeling like mechanical instead of human, which is bad. But even perfect translators can't solve the biggest problem. Because research on communication shows that the actual words don't carry much meaning. It's the tone, the body language, the facial expression, how a person actually talks is very important. And when somebody speaks through a translator, they don't actually share that. They don't actually share the thoughts that they have, right? Imagine a client saying, "Yeah, I think we can move forward." That sentence means nothing by itself, right? The meaning is in the hesitation, the tone, the expression, the body language, the emotion, the delivery of the actual words. A translator can translate the sentence, but it can't actually translate the meaning of the word. And that matters because most professionals actually make decisions and communicate with emotions and with necessary language, right? Doctors, attorneys, salespeople, executives, founders, the list can go on, right? You all rely on subtle cues, and translators, they don't give those subtle cues that most people need to have. And if you don't understand those cues, then you are getting left out of crucial information. But there is something even bigger than emotional nuance, which I think is very important because emotional nuance is the means and the notion of how we speak it. And it is the foundation of language, but the thing that's most important in my opinion is the trust. Because people naturally feel safer if you speak with them in their target language. Even if somebody's bilingual, they will still feel you are one of them. And that pays off in the long term, I think. That pays off in the long run. If you can speak with somebody in their target language, then that's where the real trust happens. There's less friction, less mental effort going into communicating and sharing your ideas with them. And when someone speaks to you in their personal language, in their target language, in their native language, they are some sort of like a different person. They're more warmer, they're more nicer. And that's because they grew up with that. And they connect that language with family, friends, right? And they connect their language that they learned with, strangeness, new people, scary, out of comfort. It feels personal. It feels like family, not really transactional. And when somebody likes you and finds you valuable and finds you like a real person that is trying to actually help them, then that person starts trusting you. And when that person starts trusting you, that's where the referrals happen. Because if a person likes you, they know you, they trust you, that's when they can already talk to their friends about it, talk to their neighbors about it. Because Mexican and Latin American and even like Spanish people, they have a pretty big network of people that they know. And people refer other people because people refer professionals who they feel connected to, who they feel emotional to, because referrals are emotional connections. That's why a professional with like amazing technical skills and abilities, and then another that like doesn't know the target language of a person, that's locked out, completely out of that person's network and like everything, and a person that does know their target language, they can speak. Obviously, the person that knows Spanish will be able to communicate way better. One delivers service, the other builds relationships, connection, and real value. And the language that you speak and you know massively affects the category that you fall into. So the question becomes, how do professionals learn languages quickly without grammar textbooks or without rules or apps or courses? Interesting. Actually, talking about courses, I don't really like courses, but I built one. It's like a 7-day amazing free course that helps you build a foundation in Spanish and so that you can understand how your brain actually learns, and then the foundation of Spanish. Not beginner level stuff. It's stuff that you'll use for the rest of your life. It's in the description. Grab it. It's amazing. It's fantastic. Like, I spent so much time on this. Now, what happens when the interpreter disappears? Chapter number 3. Usually when people think like language learning, they overcomplicate it. They think, oh, grammar rules, perfect pronunciation, I need to know every single word. But in reality, it's not really that, especially for professionals. Professionals don't need random vocab at all. They need functional vocabulary. A doctor doesn't need to debate philosophy in Spanish. They just need to ask questions for patients. They need to know some basic like terms, vocabulary for like sicknesses and stuff. They need reassurance phrases, conversational phrases, right? They don't need like the elephant is walking outside. They don't really need that. That's why many professionals become faster than most people expect, is because they spend time on learning the conversation and phrases that they actually need, working with custom languages, custom phrases and custom words that they need, learning their vocabulary instead of learning a vocabulary. Because a surprisingly small amount of patterns covers most professional language. Like, usually words live in chunks and patterns, and if you just learn that one chunk or pattern, then you can fully learn that word. An example, like what I personally do. In the past, I used to learn words like separately, but I would never ever be able to actually learn the language well. So I would learn a word and then I'd forget it after a couple of years. But when I started doing this one thing, which I'm going to tell you right now, I started actually being able to create sentences. So what it is, it's you take a verb or a word that you need to learn, and all you do is you connect it with other words or phrases that you need to learn. Like, for example, I want and then apple. I want an apple. That's a very simple example, but there's lots of other advanced examples. For example, like we are going to the beach, right? Nos vamos a la playa. Nos vamos a la playa. Or no, that's a bad example. We need to work. Necesitamos trabajar. We need to work. Necesitamos trabajar. You need to, you need to work tomorrow. Tú necesitas trabajar mañana. Tú necesitas trabajar mañana, right? Now that's just a random example, but hopefully you understood that. Now, another thing that I would really focus on in the beginning is to work on your sound system. Now, what is the sound system? It is how your brain creates sounds. Literally, it's how your brain creates sounds and how your brain listens and how your mouth creates sounds, how your brain tells your mouth to create sounds, right? So the muscle memory. I would listen and focus and work on correct pronunciation from day one so that your neural pathways lock into that correct pronunciation for the rest of your life. Because if from the beginning you can't pronounce words correctly, then you won't be able to actually speak the language. So focus on pronunciation, on real conversation with a real feedback loop in the beginning. Okay, now I probably have no time. Like, I have no time in my day. I can't learn Spanish. This sucks. I said the same thing to myself like a couple of years ago when I was learning languages, Spanish and Russian and Serbian. I needed to learn these languages, right? So I was like, you know what? Let me just, on my ride to work, let me just download a couple podcasts. Then I'm going to walk to the park with my friend. On the walk to the park where we're going to meet, I'm going to like plug in some headphones, listen to some Spanish. And then also like I have a road trip next week. I'm going to download like 5 hours of podcast for that in Spanish. Boom. And over time, once you realize and you have this identity of like, okay, I'm a Spanish learner, I want to speak Spanish, that is when you actually start understanding, you know what, I have time. I can speak Spanish. I have time to speak Spanish. And I will find time to speak Spanish, right? And if you do find your time to speak Spanish, that's when the real magic happens, because in between your commutes, your walks, your whatever, not shower, but like cooking or whatever, you slowly speak Spanish, right? And this builds up. And over time, your commutes and your walks and your lunches start becoming and turning into real conversation, real understanding. And one thing that I like to do is when I'm walking somewhere, I like to take a video, like take my phone, grab a video and just like record myself. So like this, you can turn your passive time that you spend commuting into actually real active time, learning your language. I mean, that's passive time, but like passive time learning your language. Now, obviously, you need to have active study in your day, but this is just an example, right? I also believe that active practice, which is like you speaking or creating sentences or working on the language, is also crucial, and you should also add that into your schedule. I recommend adding it somewhere in the morning time because that's usually when you're best, and then reviewing that in the evening. So study in the morning, review in the evening is perfect. That's what I personally do. When I learn languages, I usually like in the morning, I wake up pretty early at 5 a.m. So usually after some work blocks, some deep work in the morning, I do my study session of languages, and then in the evening, for my retention, I just remember everything and go through some flashcards and stuff like that, right? But the biggest mistake that I see is that professionals know, okay, I need to learn a language because I need to grow my business, I need to expand it, I need to have a deeper connection with my Spanish-speaking clients, with the Spanish-speaking patients. This is a big opportunity. I will get ahead of 90% of other professionals in my field, create my own monopoly, but they don't start. They just don't actually start because they have this fear of speaking. They have this fear of speaking the language. And that's exactly what I solved this problem with just one simple thing that I just implemented in my daily routine. And it was hard in the beginning, but after a while it became easy. And this is walking and recording small video messages of yourself while speaking. Now this forces output. This turns your passive thoughts into real active thoughts. And this is like a game changer. So just literally walking somewhere or driving somewhere, record a video of yourself. I mean, I was just doing it like before this video. And once you start doing that, slowly implementing Spanish into your day, that creates momentum, that creates that flow, and you start working on the language, and you start actively being somebody that identifies as, I learn Spanish, I'm learning Spanish. Not somebody that wants to learn Spanish, but you're learning it right now. And that time compounds. Over a couple of months, you can already probably have a basic conversation, right? Now, if you want to speed that up, then you can have a chat with me down there. If you want to get fluent in 4 to 6 months, which is guaranteed, you can have a chat with me. Because the professionals that are going to win in 2030 aren't going to be the smartest or the coolest. They're going to be the ones that have the most access. Access to the markets that are closed, access to the referral networks that most people can't access. And they're the ones that are building relationships with real people instead of getting better at what they do. I mean, getting better is obviously very important, but that relationship with that person is, I think that's when you can really understand their situation, understand where they're at. So yeah, hopefully this was helpful. I really want to make my videos as valuable as possible, and in the future I'll make them more valuable. Right now my goal is just to try and understand how to actually create these videos, like understand what's the actual process of the creation. But yeah, peace, bye, all the best.